This is the weird week leading up to the Super Bowl. Next week, we'll be in Arizona. We'll be in the thick of it. We'll be talking to players and coaches from both teams every day, really getting the feel for it. This week is weird.
It's like limbo. It's like being
Yeah.
in limbo. All I know is I was walking into Rivers Casino this afternoon, and it was like kind of snowing, freezing rain, puddles of ice in the parking lot, and I'm thinking, be nice to be somewhere warm.
We won't have to wait that long. And that's the good news.
On our way.
All
On
right.
our way soon.
This is the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. Like Rube mentioned, we are out here at Rivers Casino, Philadelphia, out by the sports book. Yeah, it's it's just a strange week. We can't wait to be in Arizona. We can't wait until this is like a normal week leading into a game, even though it happens to be the biggest game of the year. Uh, that'll feel at least a little bit normal. This is, we're waiting, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. But we did get some good news on Tuesday, and that's where we'll start. Landon Dickerson has a hyperextended right elbow. That's the bad news. The good news is he's going to play in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think any offensive lineman that gets hurt at this point is going to look at Lane and say, "I'm playing. I don't, I don't care what I have. I'm playing," because it'd be pretty hard not to. And look, Landon's a tough guy. Landon's playing really well. They all are, but Landon's a tough dude, and there's no doubt in my mind. This is where the extra week helps. There've been some Super Bowls where there was no extra week, it was right. It was a week after the conference championship games, but it's good because both teams get a chance to get healthy. I'm sure every Eagles fan hopes that Patrick Mahomes can really heal up here in these 2 weeks. But getting Dickerson is big. It would have been interesting if Andre Dillard, Andre Dillard has made so much progress where you can put him in at left guard, and feel like, okay, he's going to be okay. And good for them for getting him some reps. It'll make him more valuable in the open market. He's another one of the free agents, but certainly rather have Landon Dickerson there. He's Pro Bowler in year 2, and that doesn't happen very often. Usually takes offensive linemen a few years to kind of build that reputation. So certainly need him.
Yeah, and in this game in particular, Chris Jones. I mean, that's a tall task. He's been a really good player all year. He was dynamic in the AFC Championship game, and then move him around a little bit. He'll even play on the edge. I'm kind of curious to see what happens when they put him on the edge against Lane Johnson, because Lane's talked about the toughest thing for him is dealing with bull rushes, and I mean, Chris Jones is as close to an actual bull as you can get in the NFL.
Yeah.
But he does, most of his reps are inside, and they're on the defensive right. So you're talking about the interior lining. So Landon Dickerson's going to have to deal with him quite a bit in that game.
That's an interior lineman who's had 2 15-sack seasons. He's a beast. I mean, he's by far their best defensive player.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can make a very strong case he'll be the best defensive player in that game.
Ooh, interesting. I'll take Reddick, but
yeah, we'll probably talk about that next week a little bit. I'd probably take Chris Jones in that. I think he just like Reddick is so dynamic and the big plays are there, and he's great, but Chris Jones on every single snap is just a nightmare.
Yeah, I'm going to tell Hassan that you said that.
That's fine.
Okay.
Then when he's on the podium after a Super Bowl MVP performance, he'll be like, "And Dave Zangaro, you idiot." Wouldn't be the first time someone's called me an idiot. But anyway, having Landon back is a big deal. He'll probably have to wear a brace on that right elbow, so it might impact him a little bit. It might hurt him, but he's such a good player. And that line being intact for most of the season is a big deal. That line is still the strength of this team.
Yeah, Lane missed a couple games, but those guys are warriors. They're all banged up at this point. Along those lines, on unrelated, but on the O line, I thought Jordan Mailata might have had his best game of the year.
Great game.
I rewatched the game, and because I know he was disappointed in his regular season, and I thought he didn't play up to the level that he played last year. But he's making up for it. He has the talent. There's been some inconsistencies, and he's
that shoulder injury early in the
year.
I think affected him.
He even said he probably should have skipped, sat out a couple games, but he's healthy now, and he was beasting out there.
He's very, very good. It's funny because I think opposing teams that are playing the Eagles are like, well, where's the weak spot? And you can make it. Maybe it's Jordan. At times he didn't play well this year. Maybe it's Isaac, but he's been so steady. Maybe it's Landon. I don't know where the weak spot is. I don't know if they have one.
Yeah, and then maybe teams will think, well, Lane's got that injury. Maybe he's the weak spot, but
Yeah, turn on that tape.
he wasn't. He wasn't. I mean, he's had two of his best games of the year with that injury, playing with a torn adductor, which is just I just can't get over it. It's I mean, he was a legend before this. He's on another level.
Yeah,
man.
we're going to talk about Lane in a little bit, so we'll save some of the Lane talk. But Landon,
Try to stay in my lane here.
well, I see what he did there. Landon's funny because we've talked a bit about him this year and just how he's his own biggest critic, and that he's never going to change. I don't think. Like, how many All Pros would it take before he's like, okay, I'm pretty good?
He'll never say that.
Mm-hmm.
He'll never say that, and he takes it to an extreme, like when he starts saying, "I can't believe I'm still on the roster," and he believes it. I think he believes it, but yeah, and I like that. I like the fact that I mean, I don't know what Isaac thinks because Isaac doesn't really speak. He doesn't talk to us very much.
I'll tell you what, though, I think Isaac is an underrated storyline going into the Super Bowl because the last time
Got benched.
the Eagles went there, he started off the season as a starter as a third-round pick, and he got benched.
Yeah.
Well, it was his second year as a third-round pick.
Right.
I mean, now he's back there, and he's at a different position, and he's become a really versatile and important part of that line.
No sign of Steve Wisniewski coming after his job.
Steph.
And then Wisniewski got benched for Isaac the next year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he wasn't playing bad, but Isaac was going to be the guy. Yeah, Isaac's a kind of underrated, had an underrated, really good year at a new position.
Mm-hmm.
Never played right guard other than a couple games. So really was a selfless thing for him to do. I mean, he knew Landon was going to be the left guard. We all kind of did, and he's played well there.
He has, and he might have made himself some money. He's a free agent, so
Who isn't?
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's probably we should start saying who's back next year instead of
Yeah.
who are the free agents.
Anybody they've drafted in the last 3 years is back.
Exactly. You had an interesting story, and it kind of goes back to Isaac's back for the Super Bowl run. They have a few players back for the Super Bowl run, but this is a vastly different team than when they went in 2017, up to the highest levels, and we're talking head coach, the entire coaching staff mostly,
Other than Stout. Yeah.
And the quarterback, which is another really big part of this. It's incredible what they've been able to do, and a lot of it's Howie, but a lot of it's just the stability of the franchise.
Yeah, and they're only the third team in history to make two Super Bowls 5 years apart, 6 seasons apart, however you want to say it, with a different quarterback and a different coach. And the others were the 76 and 80 Raiders. They had Madden and Stabler, and then Tom Flores and Plunkett. And the Patriots with Parcells and Bledsoe, and then with obviously Brady and Belichick. But it's really hard to do. And the crazy thing is they were competitive in the interim too.
Mm-hmm.
They made the playoffs in 18, 19, and 21 as they were overhauling the roster, kind of reshaping the team and extricating themselves from Carson's contract. Yeah. So there was a lot going on. So to stay competitive and just kind of reimagine the entire roster from top to bottom and the coaching staff, have success during that period, and then get to another Super Bowl with a completely different team this close. It just speaks volumes for Jeff Lurie's ability to first identify coaching talent. Not an easy thing to do. And the coach coming in and quickly building a culture, because both these Super Bowls came in the coach's second year, and then finding the most important piece, which is the quarterback. And in both cases, young quarterbacks. And you throw Foles in the equation too. But it just doesn't happen that you can replace so much so quickly. And it really comes back to the two pieces of this puzzle that have been intact for Jeff Lurie since 95 and Howie since 2010 as a GM, but he's been here for 20 years. More than that.
2000, he was an intern?
2000. His Wikipedia page doesn't have that he was an intern that year. They have him coming here.
Well, we could change that. I'm not a Wikipedia editor, but we can do that.
We could edit that. I just, it probably hasn't been a priority for me, but yeah, so they've each, so that's where it starts. And I think the coaches have a ton to do with it. I think if any one person is most responsible, it's Howie, a guy who could have been fired, maybe should have been fired at a couple points early on, but has really kind of hit his stride as a talent evaluator. A cat, no, he's not just a cap expert anymore. I mean, he's got good people around him that keep getting other jobs, and he keeps replacing them with good people. They've kind of they've got a winning formula, and they just keep sticking to it, and they keep winning.
Yeah, the Howie thing is pretty unbelievable. The staying power he's had. And I was in the locker room after the NFC Championship game, and Jeff Lurie was holding court. And it's something I'm probably still going to write this week. But he was just talking about making decisions that are unpopular, but making them because you know they're the right decision. And he's done that so many times. His organization has done that so many times. And one of those decisions is keeping Howie Roseman in his position of power and bringing him back into power when he lost it. Uh, how unpopular was Howie here in the city for a long time? Even in this window that we're talking about, he was an unpopular figure. It was like, can you really let him guide this next draft? Can you let him?
Rager and Jay Jaw didn't help.
Sure, but I mean, look around the league. That's where I think we're so locked into what the Eagles are doing. Like, if you look around the league, other teams miss draft picks too.
Every team's got,
but they don't rebound the way the Eagles have done it.
Yeah, no, every team's got a Jalen Rager or a Fireman Danny or a Marcus Smith. They have a lot of those, but yeah, he's. I think he's really married the personnel evaluating to the cap stuff and made it work, and really a lot of the key guys on both teams were under the radar moves when they were made.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you look at a guy like we'll talk in a little bit about Kenny Gainwell. I mean, he was a 5th round pick. Nobody was great move, Howie. Nobody was talking about that. But you look at him now, and he's like one of the most important guys in this offense. So many moves like that. You know, Reed Blankenship wasn't even a priority on draft.
Quez in the 6th round.
Quez in the 6th round. John Hightower. No, that's a bad example. But John Hightower.
T.J. Edwards undrafted.
Undrafted T.J. Edwards. Even like getting Boston Scott off the Saints practice squad in 2018.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like late in the year.
And, you know, you think about the opening kickoff. He goes 30 yards and just kind of gets everybody going. Just so many of those moves. And, you know, 4th round picks like Sweat and just
Avante
Maddox.
In the same draft.
And just as important as to be able to keep BG, Fletcher, and Kelsey with competitive contracts throughout all of that other stuff. And remember how many times we were like, oh, the Eagles are going to have cap trouble. They never do because he figures it out. But, he's just kind of next level stuff.
And he's good at planning ahead on those things. Like, they're not going to, even this offseason where we've been talking about it for months, that they have all these free agents to worry about. I mean, Howie has a loose idea of what they're going to do already.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
It's not like he's going to walk into this thing blind. And it doesn't mean everything will work out the way they want it to, because once guys hit free agency, you can't predict everything that's going to happen. So there'll be some pitfalls there. But the roster construction is fascinating to me because he really does seem to, like, they have, at least this team, it's the perfect blend of outsiders, not outsiders, but like guys they brought in free agency with draft picks, with old draft picks, guys who have been here forever, and it all kind of meshes together well. I think roster construction is really important, and sometimes that part of it and like the pie and how it's made up doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah, that's true. And both teams also had those 1-year guys who that often doesn't work because guys who are just kind of coming, like you think of like Torrey Smith, he was here for 1 year. He was here for 1 year, right? Just 17. Guys like that. It's not easy to get culture buy-in to guys who are just passing through. They're like, well, I'm just here to make some money. But he's finding the right guys who fit the culture, even if they're only going to be here for a year. And there's a bunch of those guys this year. It doesn't seem like, you think about guys like Kaiser White and James Bradbury and all the 1-year guys, and they might be back. Some of them might be back, but this is their first year. How well they fit in on the field and in the locker room.
CJ, too, is another big one. And he was probably the biggest question mark.
Yeah.
because they got him late, and he has a reputation in the league as being kind of a unique guy.
A little bit, and he is.
He certainly is. But it's like that's actually added to it. Like that's been a good thing
Right, right.
because he has so much personality, and
And Nick wants those guys to,
mhm.
let your personality show. And I think if you're a player who has been in the doghouse before for letting your personality show, to hear a coach say, just be yourself, it's got to be, of course, you're going to play hard and you're going to want to win for that guy.
Yeah, it gives some ownership to the players,
Yeah,
and it matters.
yeah.
I did want to mention though the Jeff Lurie talking about the tough decisions. Kind of interesting. He was asked like where that comes from, like where he learned that, and the Boston boy in him said Red Auerbach.
Really?
Yeah, just watching how he had all these tough decisions to make. Like I'm guessing, like when he grew up, was watching
Yeah.
those teams and how like he just made a lot of tough decisions that weren't popular at the time, but he thought they were in the best interest of the team and the franchise, and he made them.
Who asked him that question?
I think it was Connor Orr from Sports Illustrated.
Sure.
Yeah, it was very good. It was, he kind of been talking about making these tough decisions, so it was like a natural
Follow up.
follow up. But it was kind of fascinating to hear him talk about it that way.
That's really interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, one of the big moves they made, obviously, and it wasn't popular at the time, and Jalen Hurts let us know that on Sunday, drafting Jalen Hurts, and we talked. I mean, we had a pod that night, and we're like, "What the heck are they doing?" I remember. So the way it works in the draft is, for the first round, Ruben and I have like a bunch of little pre-writes. Right, this is a little bit how the sauce gets made here, but we have a bunch of pre-writes written, and that year, your guy got drafted in the first round. So I was up with the second rounder, which is a lot because it's still an important pick and you got to be like ready to write it. And they made the Jalen Hurts pick, and I said, I I can't write this.
I don't
I
understand
don't
it.
understand it. And until and it was the Eagles realized that we would be like that because normally they wait until the end of the day because there's rounds 2 and 3. They wait until the end of the day to come out and talk to us about what they did. They didn't wait. I mean, they got Howie up there immediately to explain why they did this.
And that was a remote draft year, right? That we were
Yeah,
home. Yeah.
I say up there. It was
Yeah.
in there in the screen.
Right. Yeah, I remember I was sitting on my couch watching the draft, and I got a text from actually it was Jen Vrentis from SI, now at New York Times, saying, "I can't believe you guys drafted Jalen Hurts." I'm like, "What?" Like, because I guess I don't know, my TV was on delay or something, but it was like 10 seconds before they announced it, and I was like, "Yeah, right." Like, just what is happening here? And then I was like, "Oh my goodness." Yeah.
And I remember it was like I was kind of like frozen. So I can write they drafted Jalen Hurts.
Dave, actually, I had to write the story because Dave just couldn't. It was too big for him.
That's not true. I really rose to the occasion there, but I had to wait because, and even after the explanation, I think a lot of us were kind of confused by it.
I know one person who was confused by it.
Yeah, and look, at the
It's a
time,
fine line.
I think that was a valid concern for the rest of us because we knew that the starter they had in place was a little fragile.
That's putting it mildly, and it really didn't help him. Didn't help his.
And it made things worse before they got better.
Oh yeah.
And look, I don't want to say Howie was lucky, but there's a little bit of luck involved. I don't think they knew that Jalen was going to become the franchise quarterback. I don't think that was the plan when they made this move, but they certainly liked him because you don't throw a wrench into the whole operation for a guy if you don't really like him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's. I'd love to give Howie some truth serum, and
I would too.
yeah, and have that conversation with him. But, um, he has kind of admitted since that Carson's injuries were. I mean, they felt like they needed a quarterback, a better quarterback, a better number two, who could handle that. And but they gave Carson a lot of money, also. Uh, yeah, it's crazy to think that. I mean, Carson was MVP on his way in 17, and that's another parallel between the teams. Now we have another guy who was on his way to be the MVP who replaced him. And imagine if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, Carson's going to be like, my two backups were Nick Foles and Jalen Hurts, and they're both going to be Super Bowl MVPs, and I'm sitting here looking for my fourth team in 4 years. as a backup, most
It's
likely.
amazing.
It's incredible. And I will go to my grave believing that Carson had elite ability, and we saw it. And I think it was a combination of the mental, I don't know, stress that the Jalen pick put on him, and the concussion added with the ACL and the MCL
And the back.
and the back. I think it just. But I mean, even last year with the Colts, he had a really good stretch there. There's talent there, but yeah, I think it's getting increasingly more difficult for it to come out.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly as well.
Yeah.
But Jalen is, and we've talked about this privately before, but uh, it's funny because we talked about a lot of the things we're talking about with Jalen now. We talked about with Carson in 17. Now, obviously, it's different because Jalen's going to be playing in the big game, but we thought, okay, they had this young quarterback who's going to be here for a long, long time. And like, all right, no, what's the difference? Now, the first difference is obviously health. The second difference is the mental side of it.
Yeah.
And I have so much faith in Jalen from the mental side of it that you feel a lot better giving him that big contract. You feel a lot better with him going forward as the franchise quarterback.
Although when they gave Carson that contract, I didn't feel like they were making a big mistake or anything.
I didn't either.
It was a little risky, but it always will be. I think you're talking about two extremes as far as mental toughness. I really do, and I mean, and I like Carson, and I got along with him, but the mental toughness just wasn't there, and it's there unlike anyone I've ever seen with Jalen. I've never seen confidence, the mental toughness, the ability to block out whatever is going on around him, good or bad. He's a different breed from that standpoint, and I mean, I would say there's in my mind there's zero chance that that's going to change and that will have any kind of repeat. I mean, you worry about him getting hurt, and he's been hurt for both postseasons, and the way he plays the game is it sustainable? But the mental side of it, he's as strong mentally as anyone I've ever seen.
And it's so funny because here's this 24-year-old guy who is in his second year as a full-time starter about to play in the Super Bowl. And no one in the 2 weeks leading up to this game is going to question if he's going to live up to the moment or if he's going to be overwhelmed by it. It's just not even in our
Well, they'll be asked about it.
Yeah, but anyone who's been around him isn't even thinking about it.
Right.
It's so funny because that should be a huge storyline in a game of this young quarterback going up against a team that's been there before, a quarterback who has all this experience, a quarterback who's won it before, and here comes this young kid. But based on what he's done in college and based on his mental makeup and based on what we've seen from him since he's been in the NFL, it's not even like in the back of my mind, it's not there at all.
No, you're right, and I'm sure that'll be a storyline for people that don't know him or haven't been around him. But nobody's more prepared for the moment than him, because I honestly believe when he's out there for that 3 hours he's playing, it's another football game for him, and he really believes that. It's because and this is the approach that Nick has instilled in them, but I think he had it before Nick.
I think it's Nick and Jalen instill it in the team.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, the head coach gets to talk in front of the group, but Jalen does too, and it's the same message.
Yeah.
They're lockstep in that.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And it's so funny when you have a 24-year-old kid who's kind of, teaching the older guys how to act and how to behave. And it's special. I don't know what's going to happen in the game, and I don't know how healthy Jalen will be, but as far as the mental side of it, that's the last thing I worry about.
I'm with you there. Catch all the sports action and more at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Whether it's the money line or the pass line, there's something for everyone in a great sports book. Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Philly loves a winner. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
It's the Nissan Thrill of the Drive event, so gift yourself what you really want this holiday season and shop your local Nissan store or visit nissanusa.com today. Just like the holidays, these offers won't last.
Opioid addiction is a national public health crisis. The Someone You Know podcast from the Independence Blue Cross Foundation offers inspiring stories that challenge stigma, offer hope, and humanize the disease of addiction. Download the new Season 3 of Someone You Know on all major podcast platforms. Rube, we in our last podcast, it was right after the AFC Championship game. We know it's Chiefs, Eagles in the Super Bowl, and that line was moving like crazy. It's finally settled down a little bit. PointsBet has the Eagles as 1.5 point favorites in this game.
That seems about right to me. Yeah, 1.5 to 2 point area. It's a little tricky because we don't know either quarterback's health. We don't know exactly how much they'll be compromised. We do know neither one is going to be 100%. How close they are to that, I think, is a big part of where this line is.
Something that I've been thinking about, the Super Bowl is a weird game. As much as everyone says it's like just another game, there are longer pauses in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes has a high ankle sprain. Could that affect him more? A long halftime, long TV timeouts. Could that ankle get cold?
Sure.
Am I thinking too much into this?
No, I mean, I'm sure they've thought of that. I mean, Rick Burkholder is the best in the business, their trainer. He was here for 14 years. Um, I'm sure they'll put him on the bike machine or ice it, whatever they need to do. I don't think that's going to be a factor.
Okay.
But I appreciate your outside the box thinking.
Trying to go next level here.
That is. By the way, I'm going to go back to what we were talking about before. Only 7 quarterbacks have started the Super Bowl before their 25th birthday. Brady, Mahomes, Marino, Goff, David Woodley of Miami back in '82, Drew Bledsoe and Ben Roethlisberger. Brady's the only one that played well, and he didn't play great. None of them had a passer rating over 86. Interesting. That's not an easy ask.
Yeah, it isn't. No concern.
No, me either.
Yeah. It's time to get your swagger back with PointsBet Sportsbook. PointsBet, your move. We wanted to talk about another young player on this team. We mentioned him after the NFC Championship game because he played well, but he could play well in the Super Bowl too. Kenny Gainwell, all of a sudden, looks like the guy we thought they were going to get.
Yeah, and it's really been interesting to watch his emergence. During the regular season, Miles averaged 14.4 touches per game and Gainwell 4.5. In the postseason, they're both at exactly 14.5. So Miles is just a little bit lower, and I think that's probably the knee. It's not 100%. I think he's okay, but why run him in the second half when you're up 30 points? But for Gainwell to have his touches triple, and I don't think it's really any kind of reflection of Miles. Miles is playing fine, but I think it's Shane Steichen and Nick just understanding that we have 2 weapons here, and we're going to use them. And if it takes 17 weeks to really understand what Kenny Gainwell is and what he's capable of, I really love that about Shane and Nick, just that flexibility. Like a lot of coaches would be like, well, he's the backup, man. That's what he's going to be. But they're not afraid to go with the hot hand. Kenny Gainwell had 1 game all year with 70 scrimmage yards. He's got 198 scrimmage yards in 2 playoff games. He's only the 6th running back in Eagles history with back-to-back 70-yard scrimmage games in the postseason. Ricky Waters, Wilbert, Deuce, Westbrook, J.J. I mean, that's the company he's in. It's been really interesting to see that, and he can handle it. He's a really good player, and he's a tough runner, and he has a knack for. You know what he has a knack for that I really like when the offense is bogged down. They've had a couple 3 and outs. They're not doing anything. He always seems to make a play. He always seems to jumpstart the offense when it's kind of bogged down and not really. And that's a really unique skill. He kind of seems to rise to the occasion in those situations. I like that about him.
Yeah, and he's had pretty much the same role all year. He's a 3rd down back. He's 2-minute back, but he's earning some extra reps now in the rotation, especially if they think Miles is at his best in a limited capacity, or at least more limited than what we saw during the regular season. Now, obviously in the Super Bowl, you're not holding him back. You're letting him go as much as you need to win the game. But I think Gainwell's to the point where you don't just play him because Miles is a little banged up. You play him because he can help you. Like, he really can. He's a weapon. and I don't know if I've heard some people ask me if he could be the answer as the starter next year. I'm still not there with Gainwell. I don't know how he would handle being the number one back, but I love him in this role.
Yeah, he doesn't get hurt. And I mean, when you have 4 carries a game, it's a lot harder. But he's a physical runner, and he doesn't miss time. I'm starting to think maybe he could handle it, but that's a question for another day. Um, yeah, it's really interesting, and he's a weapon. And I think if you're a defense, what would you rather see? Just Miles, 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 or this combination? I think it's a lot harder to stop an offense when you have different skill sets, different styles of running coming at you back and forth. And Shane has a real good feel for when to use each one, when to change up. Has a real good sense of when it's time to go to Kenny, and it works.
Yeah, and Kenny was kind of billed as being Naheem Hines, and it was the easiest comparison. I was waiting for that kind of impact, and we're
Yeah.
starting to see it. It's such a good sign. I feel like and I want to ask him about this week, but he looks bigger to me. Maybe not bigger, but stronger. He's tougher to bring down. I don't know if he's changed his body composition a ton from year one to year two, and I don't know why, if he did that, it took so long to see this version of him. But it started like that's what has kind of stood out to me. He doesn't look like the same player he was last year.
Well, he was 22 last year,
That's true.
and it was his first year in the NFL. And I think you get onto that lifting program and that nutrition program that they have here, and it's this is what you have. He does look bigger to me and stronger, and hasn't lost an ounce of speed. He's 23 years old. I was looking up. He's got like the 5th most scrimmage yards by a postseason running back before their 24th birthday. I mean, you just don't see guys doing this. It's really, I mean, he's going to be I think he's going to be a really big part of their game plan Sunday.
That's interesting. I thought the Chiefs linebackers played pretty well in the AFC Championship game, and they have good safeties in the middle of the field. But
I mean, if you can make plays against the Niners defense,
that's fair.
Yeah. And that's what was so impressive about him. I mean, he just doesn't care. He's just, I don't care what they're ranked.
It's so funny because you look at the numbers from that game, and if you didn't watch it,
Right.
you go, the running backs weren't that good. They averaged like, was it 3.4, 3.8, 3 point. I'm looking at the individuals, 3.5. Yeah, that's not all under 4.
Right.
But then if you watch the game, you're like, okay, those were tough yards.
Yeah.
They were making plays. There were a lot of zeros and ones in there, but there were some chunks.
At the end of the game, I mean, both teams knew the other team was just going to run on every play for different reasons. So I think Kenny had a -1 at the end. Before that, he was close to 4. So that stuff, I think this is that was the ultimate game where the stats just didn't tell the story. And they to run it for 150 and 4 touchdowns against that defense, I mean, that was a game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially once you get up. He's got to run that out. And Brock Purdy, by the way, we found out has a torn UCL. Serious injury. I feel bad for him. Anyone who was questioning his toughness is an idiot. Guy could not throw the football. And we saw that from their game plan.
Yeah.
You're down a few touchdowns in the second half and they're not throwing a football. It's because he's hurt.
Well, Brian Dable did the same thing. Daniel Jones was healthy, but that's another story.
That's fair. Yeah, so I hope Brock Purdy gets healthy. I liked watching him this year. It was a fun story. And I don't know what they're going to do in San Francisco. That's a tough thing to figure out.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think they're going to trade Garoppolo, or is he up? Is his deal up?
I don't know.
I think they're going to go with Lance and Purdy competing.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, either way, it won't be Jimmy G.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. All right, we wanted the last thing here, and we talked about Lane. Well, we talk about Lane every pod because he deserves it at this point. But what he's doing is so special. And I saw someone ask you, about your top 5 offensive linemen in Eagles history. And I wanted to visit that on this podcast.
Okay. Yeah. I don't remember. No, I picked, and it's tough, but who did I go with? Al Wistert, who was like a 5-time All-Pro. And the thing about Al Wistert, he wasn't just an All-Pro back in the day. He was the captain of the 48 and 49 teams that won the NFL championship. And he taught at Riverside High School while he was playing for the Eagles. Like not after his career, but during his career, he was a teacher and a coach at Riverside, the Rams. So he and Jay Flanagan have something in common, I guess. Um, and so I went with Al Wister and Bob Brown from the old days. Bob Brown, 5-time All-Pro. Only played here 5 years, Hall of Famer, played 10 seasons in the league. And then I went with Kelsey, Lane, and JP. Um, and, look, there's some really good guys Jerry Sizemore and Stan Walters, Trey Thomas, John Runyon. Trey might be the next guy on that list. But I think Lane has earned that spot.
Yeah.
And
As good as Trey was, it's tough to take off Lane or JP.
yeah, JP's got to be on there.
7 Pro Bowls as an Eagle.
9 in a row, 7 the last 7 here, 2 with Buffalo. Yeah, he's got to be on there. Kelsey might be at the top of the list. A couple people tweeted to me and asked about Chuck Bednarik, and he did play center a few years. He was a linebacker. He was a linebacker. If you want my list of top 5 linebackers, he'd be on there, along with
Brian Roll,
Omar Gaither.
We both had the same idea.
Nate Gary,
Moses Foku.
Yeah, Jamar Chaney be on that list. They had some really bad linebackers during the Big Red era, but all those guys you mentioned are Big Red.
Yeah, Keenan Clayton.
Yeah, well, he was pretty good actually. But yeah, I think Lane has earned that, and I know a lot of people ask about him in the Hall of Fame. I don't think he's there yet.
I don't think it's crazy though.
Well, I think a lot of it just depends how long he plays. But 2 All-Pros now, 2 Super Bowls, and
well, winning this one would help.
Yeah, obviously. But there's things that are going to hurt him. Those 2 suspensions early in his career, it's going to make it really hard. And the people that vote are going to really, they're going to hammer him for that. I think that might keep him out. If he plays a few more years at the level he played at this year, I think he has to do that. How many Pro Bowls is he?
This is his 4th
Pro Bowls, 4 Pro Bowls.
So that stuff doesn't look good. You know what's funny though? He's kind of lamented a little bit that Pro Football Focus exists.
Yeah.
But I think Pro Football Focus, and just like there being some tangible stats out there for offensive linemen, can really help him. The fact that he hasn't given up a sack since 2020.
Yeah.
This is a dominant stretch, and we're able to put some numbers to it. I think that's helpful.
Well, he hasn't reached Evan Mathis status yet on Pro Football Focus, but they love him. They do. Their numbers really support that he's the best offensive tackle in the game over the last couple of years.
And like talking to linemen about Lane,
yeah,
it's clear. It's kind of like when you talk about Slay with corners or receivers. Like they see greatness in Lane when you talk to other offensive and defensive linemen. That should matter.
That's true. I wonder if playing right tackle as opposed to left tackle will hurt him. It shouldn't.
I think because of guys like Lane, that stigma is going away. And by the time he's up for consideration, I think it might be almost all gone.
You might be right. I'm just looking up how many Hall of Fame offensive linemen have gotten in with just 2 All-Pros, but it's not a lot. But then again, he's not done. What is he, 31?
32.
32?
Turned 33 in May.
And he said he wants to play 2 more years. I don't know if he has 2 really good years and they're still competitive, it's going to be weird because next year, there's a good chance he'll be like the senior member of the team if Kelsey, BG, and Fletcher are all gone.
Well, maybe Sue will be back.
Oh, Greg Ward's been here since 17. But yeah, it's going to be different. But talent-wise, he's there as far as I'm concerned. He's a Hall of Fame talent. It's just getting in is a different animal.
Yeah, and this is I think this becomes like a philosophical debate about longevity versus just dominance, because he checks the dominance category.
Yeah,
he might not be able to check the longevity one when you're talking about like accumulating those accolades, but just like it's kind of like you watch him. Is that a Hall of Famer? Yeah.
So Will Shields got in with 2 All-Pros. Obviously, he was a guard. Jackie Slater got in with 2 All-Pros. That's crazy.
Played a long time, though.
He played 20 years. He made like 8 Pro Bowls. He was also a right tackle. And then Mike Munchak, your boy. I just anyone who played for Houston's your boy.
The franchise before I got there.
That's right, Oilers. But yeah, they're the only ones who've played in the last 40 years to make it. But again, his career's not over. And I think once you start making All Pro, you keep making it, especially when I'm voting. Look, I think if he plays 2 more years, makes 2 more All Pros, 2 more Pro Bowls, he's in the conversation.
And he checks another box on February 12th.
Yeah,
I mean that helps too.
Big time. If you're a 2-time Super Bowl starter, yeah, that's
and arguably the best player on both of those offenses.
Yeah,
it's arguable.
Yeah, Nick had a pretty good game, but yeah.
No, I mean like
overall,
yeah.
I know what you mean. I'm just being. I mean, that's going to be a topic. Like if they do win another one, then the Hall of Fame. I mean, Howie Roseman's probably a Hall of Famer if they win another one. Jeff Lurie might be a Hall of Famer. I'll put a lot of owners.
Oh yeah, do owners go in the Hall of Fame?
I'll put him in. I'll vote for him. I don't vote for that, but you start thinking about. Does that how much does that help Fletch on top of 6?
I just realized you're wearing a Hall of Fame hoodie right now.
How about that? That's a coincidence, but
no, we planned it. We planned everything here.
Fletch has 6 Pro Bowls. I think he only has 1 All Pro.
Yeah, 2018.
But if you put 2 Super Bowls on his resume and a bounce back season this year, so it's the whole way you look at different players. When a guy's a 2-time Super Bowl champ, that's rare. It's going to be fun. Yeah. This is going to be great, man. I can't wait.
I love talking legacy stuff.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, Super Bowls matter.
Yeah.
And look, I know the voting process for Hall of Fame isn't perfect. I don't think there's ever a way to make it perfect, but this stuff matters when they get in that room and talk about it. And legacies matter.
Also, if you join, the only 24-year-old quarterbacks or younger to win a Super Bowl are Brady, Mahomes, and Roethlisberger. They're all Hall of Fame. Roethlisberger Hall of Famer, 2 Super Bowls.
Yeah,
Didn't play.
I think so.
Didn't play well in one of them. Mahomes is already in. Brady has a good chance.
Yeah, I think he'll be all right. Maybe 3rd ballot, 4th ballot. What do you think?
Yeah. So for Jalen to win one, all of a sudden his career. You start looking at his career. Obviously, he's 24, but it's a hell of a way to start.
I do this game with my buddies sometimes. It's like, look at the Eagles roster and the most likely to make the Hall of Fame, because you start with the guys who like have the resumes that are there or close, but then you have to start going the other way and finding young players who have that projection in their career. So like you would start with guys like Kelsey and Lane and Fletch, but then after them, you have to kind of go the other way and start saying, well, this guy's on that trajectory, and it would be guys like Jalen or AJ Brown, even though there's so many good receivers.
What about Sue?
He has 1 Super Bowl. This will be his 2nd.
3 All Pros, 5 Pro Bowls, 2 second-team All Pros. He's 5-time All Pro. 70 sacks as interior lineman. A bunch of different teams later in his career, but probably not quite. But he could be in the conversation.
Being a high first-round pick follows your whole career.
2nd pick in the draft in 2010 out of Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you got? Oh yeah, that's a great. I love that site. Yeah, Hall of Fame Monitor. He's pretty high up on that.
Sue is?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Just under Cortez Kennedy. Yeah, that's a great site. Although I don't understand, on that site they have Kelsey way too low.
Do they?
Yeah.
How do they use like
they take like 10 different parameters, championships, Pro Bowls, All Pros, years as a starter. They got some unknown secret formula that takes all these things into account. It's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, there's a bunch of parameters. Yes, statistical levels. For a quarterback, years that you had a passer rating over 100 and stuff like that, or 4,000 yards. Yeah, who knows? It's interesting, but it's flawed.
Everything's flawed.
Everything's flawed.
The sooner you accept that, the better our lives become.
That's our motto here at the Eagle Eye Podcast. Yeah. Everything is flawed.
And this podcast certainly is. But if you enjoy it, Nonetheless, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. That's all for today. We want to thank Rivers Casino Philadelphia for having us out yet again. For Rube, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye presented by Nissan. We'll talk to you soon. Guys not flying back for one day only? Yeah. After Nick, you want to come up?